Okay, so Pope Francis. It feels like, I don't know, every time I turn around, he's doing something else that's making headlines.
Yeah, I know what you mean. He's definitely a busy guy.
Calling for peace in, like global conflicts, trying to shake things up, it seems like, at the Vatican itself,
Mm.
and even, working through some pretty public health challenges all at the same time. It's a lot.
It is.
But I feel like we often only get like the soundbite version,
Mm.
the headline.
Right.
And I'm really interested to go a little bit deeper. I think it's worth taking a closer look at what he's actually saying and doing, and also thinking about why it matters, to us.
Absolutely.
So today we're doing a deep dive on all things Pope Francis,
Sounds good.
looking at some of his recent actions and statements and also what he's got coming up. Because, and this is important to remember, Pope Francis isn't just a religious figure.
Yeah, that's right.
He's someone whose influence is felt way beyond the walls of the Vatican. He's a global figure.
Totally. He's weighing in on global politics, humanitarian issues, even things like environmentalism. I mean, it's pretty remarkable.
It is. Like, for example, did you know that he's actually planning a trip to Southeast Asia
Mm-hmm.
later this year? It's going to be a historic first.
Mm-hmm.
And the things he's been saying, even just about internal church matters, like stuff happening at the Vatican,
Mm-hmm.
are causing a real stir
Mm.
from people all over the spectrum. So we've got a lot to cover.
We do.
But I think a good place to start is with something that's been in the news a lot lately. Pope Francis's call for a ceasefire in Gaza.
Mm.
I mean, that was huge.
Right. Yeah, no, it definitely made waves. And I think it's important to note that it's not an isolated incident. This is very consistent with how he's approached these kinds of conflicts for pretty much, since the beginning of his papacy.
So, I mean, he's been a vocal advocate for peace in other conflicts too. Like, what are some examples of that?
Well, for example, he's spoken out really strongly against the war in Ukraine. He's called for, dialogue and diplomacy repeatedly. And he's really pushed world leaders to prioritize like the humanitarian crisis that's unfolding there.
And he's not afraid to call out, like powerful governments and institutions too,
Right.
which is kind of remarkable.
It is. He really emphasizes that humanitarian approach to conflict resolution, which sometimes, puts him at odds with those who are maybe taking a more political stance.
Right, because, and this is something I've always wondered about. How do you actually balance those two things?
Right.
Like the urgent need for humanitarian aid with, the messiness of politics.
It's a real challenge. I mean, there are always going to be these intricate power dynamics at play, and often, competing interests.
Yeah.
But I think what's notable about Pope Francis's approach is that he seems genuinely willing to engage with all sides,
Mm-hmm.
to try and find, even a sliver of common ground, even when it seems like there is none to be found.
Okay, so that's him on the global stage.
Peacemaker.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
But it's not just on the global stage that he's kind of stirring things up. Back home at the Vatican, there's this thing called the Synod of Bishops happening right now,
Okay.
which I'll be honest, I don't really understand what that is.
Yeah.
Can you kind of explain it to me? And why is it such a big deal?
Yeah, so the Synod of Bishops, it's basically like a big meeting. Bishops from all over the world, they come together to kind of advise the Pope. They discuss different issues, and offer their perspectives.
Okay.
But this particular synod is pretty unique because it's tackling some really controversial topics.
Like what?
Like the role of women in the church, and also, the inclusion of LGBTQ plus individuals.
Okay, so this isn't just like a routine meeting.
Not exactly. These are really sensitive issues that, have been debated within the church for decades.
Right.
So the fact that they're being, openly discussed at such a high level, it suggests that there might be a real shift in thinking happening within the church.
But the real changes on the table. That's kind of a big deal, right?
Yeah, it definitely is. But, like with anything, there's pushback. There are a lot of conservative voices within the church that are very resistant to these kinds of changes.
Yeah.
So it's really unclear what the outcome of the synod is going to be. It's this tension between, those who are pushing for reform and those who are really holding on to more traditional views.
Yeah, and it's also happening at a time when, I mean, let's be honest, the Pope is 86 years old.
Mm-hmm.
He's had some, very public health challenges lately, respiratory problems, mobility issues. And yet he's still pushing forward with this, this incredibly demanding schedule.
Yeah. I mean, he's definitely not slowing down.
No.
He has delegated some responsibilities, to other people, but he's still got a very packed agenda.
It's kind of remarkable.
Yeah, it is. It really speaks to his commitment, I think, to the work that he feels he needs to do, to address these issues, these global issues that he sees as so urgent.
Right. So speaking of urgent, that kind of brings us to this historic trip that he's got coming up
Yeah.
to Southeast Asia, Indonesia, and Papua New Guinea.
Yep.
I mean, this is a first for a pope.
It is. He'll be the first pope to ever visit these countries.
Wow. And I'm curious about the choice of location. I mean, why these places in particular?
Well, one of his big priorities is interfaith dialogue, fostering understanding and collaboration between different religions. And in Southeast Asia, it's a region with a large Muslim population.
Okay.
So it makes sense that he would want to go there and kind of engage with Muslim leaders and communities.
Right. And also, didn't you say that Asia has like a huge Catholic population itself?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, over 200 million Catholics in Asia.
Wow. So this is a big deal for a lot of people.
Yeah. Yeah, this trip has the potential to really have a significant impact.
Yeah. And it's not just about interfaith dialogue either.
Right.
He's also going to be focusing on environmental issues.
Right. Which again, that's very much in line with his, with his whole message of protecting the planet.
Okay, so wow. I mean, we've got a pope who is like this tireless advocate for peace.
Yeah.
He's someone who's trying to push for change within the church itself. And even though he's dealing with, his age and his health, he's still this incredibly active global figure.
I mean, his impact is undeniable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It really makes you wonder, with all this focus that he has on peace, on interfaith dialogue, on the environment. I mean, these are huge global issues. So how might his efforts actually shape the future?
Right.
Not just to the Catholic Church, but the world as a whole.
That's the big question.
It is a big question. And one that I think we all need to be thinking about. How do these issues connect with our own values and our worldview? It's something worth considering.
It really is.